Hey everyone, welcome back to Breaking the Duopoly, a Libertarian Perspective with Nicholas Clisby Sabathia. I'm still going over what I should name this podcast. It's only my second ever podcast recorded. If I continue doing this, someone's going to look back and be like, man, this guy was freaking horrible. But, thank you for bearing with me, trying to figure out a name for it. But I just want to give you guys, my view on things and perspectives. First episode kind of went into an overview of what I'll be covering and, teased on some things. But the second one also is going to be another short kind of clipping, just diving into what is currently going on right now and kind of how to look at it from a libertarian perspective. I just wanted to get into it today and kind of record as soon as possible while things are still hot. So as everyone's aware, Trump's been cracking down on ICE, illegal immigrants and, deploying the military and ICE and to areas with heavy immigrant populations like Southern California and Texas. What I want to say is from a libertarian perspective, the official libertarian stance, right? What we believe in is freedom of movement, freedom of trade, open borders. Now, you might hear a small but very loud group on X, formerly Twitter, who will say, no, close down the borders. We support Trump. We want ICE. Go military, go get those guys, right? In that small group, they're very loud. They're led by, a group that, in my opinion, should be disaffiliated from the Libertarian Party. You'll see them on X, formerly Twitter, LPNH, Libertarian Party, New Hampshire. They just say some wild, out-of-pocket stuff, but they lead that small but loud group that is really not a group of principled libertarians, in my opinion. They're a bunch of people who kind of want to steer the Libertarian Party to the right and kind of are looking for Republican light party. They're disenfranchised with the Republican Party. They like Trump, but they want to have Trump, but have Trump in the Libertarian Party. And at the same time, they want their cake and they want to eat it too, right? They want a new party. But anyways, that is not the principled stance for libertarians. So, of course, and our presidential candidate, Chase Oliver, has been very public and very loud on X and saying, our stance, which is, we love to see people standing up for their rights and their freedoms. Everyone should have the freedom of movement, the freedom of trade without government hindrance, without all these government agencies, right? If you look over the history, I studied cultural anthropology in college. If you look over the history of, humanity, people have moved around, right? People have moved around all over and they've been able to trade freely. We need to get back to that. We need to get back to those principles of us being able to kind of move as we'd like. If your opportunities aren't so great in the area you're in, which in the areas that these immigrants are coming from, South America, Central America, Mexico, not so much anymore, but Central and South America, where you really don't have as many opportunities. And people say, oh, they should fix their country. Well, you know what? They've been a victim of United States foreign policy to the extent where their country's not immediately fixable. It's not going to be fixed in their lifetime, right? So should we just doom this group of people to live in those countries that have been, unfairly targeted by U.S. foreign policy in horrific ways that has doomed them to a lifetime of poverty? Or should they be allowed to freely move and search for other opportunities? I believe the latter. They should be allowed to freely move and search for other opportunities. And that's something that I want people to get. These countries, the countries of people that are coming into America, whether it be illegally, whatever, whatever you want to call it, these countries, the opportunities are very slim. I don't know if anyone's ever visited Colombia, Honduras, El Salvador. There's a lot of gang activity, and if you look over the history of U.S. foreign policy, when Clinton emptied out the jails and the prisons, regardless of nationality, and sent them to, Central America, which turned their country over an upheaval of violence and terror because he just emptied out the prisons of the worst people, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of their country of origin, and dumped them all into, Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras. And so they just went, and those countries were still kind of developing. And so they didn't have the infrastructure to kind of handle that. And it just went wild. Or if you want to look at the CIA, working to overthrow governments in Central and South America. The U.S. has had its hands on those countries in Latin America for a millennia, right? And the result of that is those people are seeing that their opportunities are not so much, and so they are coming up into the United States. They're flooding up into the United States because they don't see things changing for the better within their lifetime, and, survival instinct move, right? We should be welcoming those people in. We should be, it's not like they're coming in and, people say, oh, they're committing crimes, right? I think they commit crimes at a much lower percentage than American citizens. And that's a fact. American citizens are like at a 9%, and illegal immigrants are like at a 2% rate, right? I mean, they're trying their best not to have interactions with the police, and people will blow up stories about an illegal immigrant killed this person. Yeah, that's, off the top of my head, I can't remember the phrase, but you can't pick one, example and use it to blanket punish a large group of people that are rather, on a large scale, peaceful and hardworking, right? So, that's my take on that. I don't think that, as a libertarian, and again, as a libertarian, you should not be cheering for the military or any type of federal government agency kind of subduing and oppressing other people, right? We're against that. We don't like the state. That's our stance. We are anti-state. So you should not be cheering for the state against the people, right? The side, it's not very hard. The side you should be on, if it is ever the state versus the people, should always be the people. And if you find yourself on the side of the state, then maybe you should rethink if you are a libertarian, if this is the right movement for you, if this is the right party for you. There's a couple parties out there, the Democrats and the Republicans, who do love the state. They love the state. And if that's what you love, if you love the state, if you find yourself in a situation where it's the state versus the people and you choose the state, maybe you should go, over that. That's my take on that. We're going to take a quick pause, and I'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Going to wrap this up. I'm only doing 10-minute segments right now, man. Until I get a little more organized, until everything gets figured out, sorry. Anyone that grows with me from the beginning, we're going to make it, man. We're going to make it, We're starting second episode, but there's going to be a lot more episodes. We're going to dive into a lot more hot topics of this, the moment, and especially this moment right now, as there's a lot going on. The political landscape of the United States right now is in utter chaos, right? There's a lot going on. So we're going to be diving into all that. And I really appreciate those who, are here with me, if you think of YouTube, like the early days of Mr. Beast, those that were there for the early days of Mr. Beast, it feels really rewarding when Mr. Beast is now a freaking billionaire, right? So just stick with me during the early beginnings of this. All right. To wrap things up, the Libertarian Party, the Libertarian movement stands with those at any point of time that feel the oppression of the state. The immigrants that are coming here to the United States from Central South America, Mexico, are coming here as a result of bad U.S. foreign policy for decades that has sent their countries into upheaval and led them to absolutely no other option. People act like they're coming here because, I want to start a war, I'm an invading army. No. Don't buy into that hysteria. People aren't making the trek through desert, I've seen trains of people coming from South America. They call the train La Bestia, where they ride on the top of the train. They travel from Honduras through Mexico, and they fall off, they get robbed, they get murdered. People are not putting themselves through that if they have another option. Point blank, period. People are not putting themselves through that if they have another option. Okay, we are wrapping up this episode. Thank you again. I'll see you guys for episode 3. We'll see what we touch on then. Have a good night.